Imagine opening a package that's supposed to hold one of the happiest memories your family has ever captured, only to realize someone in that memory has been erased. Not cropped, not blurred, erased. And not just anyone. Your child. Now imagine the moment your 6-year-old looks up at you with confused eyes and asks a question that stops your heart. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Mom, did I do something wrong? That was the moment everything in my life shifted. But the strangest part? When it happened, I didn't say a word. Most people think family betrayals happen in loud explosions. Screaming arguments. Doors slamming. People storming out. But sometimes betrayal is quieter than that. Sometimes it arrives in a neatly wrapped cardboard package, delivered right to your front door. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 34 years old, and until a few months ago, I believed something very simple about my family. I believed that no matter how messy life got, we still belong to each other. I was wrong. 3 years ago, my life collapsed in the way a lot of lives do. Quietly at first. Then all at once. My marriage ended. My ex-husband, Jason Miller, and I had been together since college. For a long time, I thought we were the kind of couple people envied. But things change. People change. And eventually we divorced. The only thing in my life that never stopped being certain was my daughter, Lily Mitchell. 6 years old. Bright brown eyes. A laugh that sounds like she's surprised by her own happiness. She loves drawing animals, collecting shiny rocks from playgrounds, and asking questions that start with, "Why do you think?" If you met her, you'd understand something instantly. Lily is the kind of kid who tries to make strangers smile. After the divorce, money got tight. Life got complicated. So I made a decision I never thought I would make. I moved back to my hometown. Back into my parents' house. My mother, Linda Mitchell, is 62. Organized. Opinionated. The kind of woman who believes every problem has a correct way to be solved, and that her way is usually the correct one. My father, David Mitchell, is 65. Quiet. The type of man who speaks rarely but notices everything. Living there also meant being close to my older sister, Emily Carter, 36. Emily had always been the golden child growing up. Perfect grades. Perfect career. Perfect house in the suburbs. She's married to Ryan Carter, 38, an accountant who spends most family gatherings politely nodding. They have a daughter too, Ava Carter, 7 years old. 1 year older than Lily. On the surface, our family looked like something you'd see in a holiday card. Grandparents, sisters, cousins. But families are rarely what they look like in photos. Which is ironic, considering what happened next. It started with what seemed like a completely normal idea. One evening at dinner, my mother suddenly said something that sounded almost cheerful. "You know what we should do," she said. "We haven't taken a proper family portrait in years." At first it seemed harmless. Maybe even nice. She had already done the research, of course. My mother researches everything. She had hired a professional photographer named Mark Jensen, 41 years old. Well known locally for family photography. The session wasn't cheap. $1,200. Location: a historic park about 20 minutes outside town. Golden trees. Stone paths. A small lake that reflected the sky like glass. It sounded beautiful. Everyone would attend, my mother said. No excuses. At first I hesitated. But Lily's reaction changed my mind. She was thrilled. She spent 2 days deciding what she wanted to wear. Eventually she picked a bright yellow dress she had seen in a small store downtown. She said yellow looked like sunshine. On the morning of the photo shoot, the park looked like something from a magazine. Soft autumn light. Leaves drifting slowly through the air. The photographer, Mark Jensen, was already there setting up his equipment when we arrived. He seemed friendly, calm, professional. He walked everyone through where to stand. Grandparents in chairs. Adults behind them. Kids in the front row. Lily sat beside her cousin Ava on a small wooden bench. She held her stuffed fox in her lap for the first picture until Mark gently asked her to set it aside. "Perfect," he said, adjusting the camera. Everyone smiled. Click. Another shot. Click. A few different poses. Click. It all felt normal. But looking back now, there were small things I didn't notice at the time. Little moments. My mother adjusting Ava's hair again and again. Emily whispering something to her. Quick glances I didn't understand. At the time, I ignored them. Because Lily was smiling. And that was enough for me. A week later, the portrait arrived. A large framed print delivered to my parents' house. The entire family gathered around the dining table as my mother opened the package. Everyone leaned closer. Curious. Excited. And at first glance, the photo looked beautiful. Soft lighting. Perfect colors. Everyone smiling. Until my eyes moved to the front row. And my stomach dropped. Because where Lily had been sitting, there was empty space. My daughter wasn't in the picture. Not cropped. Not covered. Gone. The composition had been shifted so that Ava now sat in the center, looking like the only child in the photo. No one said anything. No one reacted. Like this was normal. Like nothing had happened. Then Lily tilted her head and looked closer at the picture. Her small finger pointed toward the bench. Mom? Her voice was quiet. Where am I? The room stayed silent. Then she asked the question that still echoes in my head. Did I do something wrong? I should have said something right then. I should have demanded answers. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed quiet. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen staring at that portrait. And eventually, I made one phone call. Because something about that picture didn't make sense. And the person who took it might be the only one who knew why. The next morning, my mother looked at the portrait again. And suddenly, she froze. What would you do if your child vanished from a family photo and nobody else seemed to notice? That was the first thing that kept repeating in my head the next morning. Because something about the entire situation didn't feel like a mistake. It felt deliberate. My mother was standing near the dining table again, holding the framed portrait like it was a priceless piece of art. Sunlight from the kitchen window spilled across the glass. Everyone else drifted in slowly. Coffee mugs. Morning routines. Normal life. Except nothing about this felt normal to me anymore. I stood there quietly watching them. Studying their faces. My sister Emily leaned over the frame first. Oh wow, she said casually. The colors came out really nice. Nice. That was the word she chose. My father David gave the photo a quick glance and nodded. Ryan, Emily's husband, barely looked up from his phone before saying, yeah, that's a good one. Then there was my mother. Linda smiled proudly. Like she had just unveiled a masterpiece. And that was the moment something inside me twisted. Because no one asked the obvious question. No one said Lily's name. It was like the empty space in that photo didn't exist. But I saw it. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. I stepped closer to the frame. My eyes scanned every detail. The background looked exactly the same as the day we took the picture. Golden trees. Stone path. Soft sunlight behind the bench. But the composition looked wrong. If you've ever seen edited photos before, you know that subtle feeling when something doesn't quite line up. The spacing between people looked slightly stretched. My sister's shoulder leaned oddly toward the center. And Ava, my niece, was sitting in the exact spot Lily had been sitting. Perfectly centered. Like the photo had been rearranged. Like someone had been removed. I glanced down at Lily. She had wandered into the room quietly. Still wearing her dinosaur pajamas. Her hair messy from sleep. She walked up beside me and stared at the portrait. At first, she looked curious. Then confused. Then she tilted her head. Mom? Her small finger touched the glass. Right where she had been sitting on that bench. Where am I? The room went silent again. You know those moments when time feels like it pauses for a second? This was one of those moments. My mother cleared her throat. Oh honey, she said quickly, the photographer must have adjusted something. Adjusted something. That was her explanation. Emily nodded immediately. Yeah, photographers edit photos all the time. Ryan shrugged. Lighting, shadows, that kind of stuff. But here's the thing. You don't adjust a child out of a photograph. Even Lily seemed to know that. She looked up at me slowly. Her voice got smaller. Did I do something wrong? I felt something sharp twist in my chest. Because kids don't ask that question unless they think they might deserve the answer. I wanted to say no immediately. Of course not. You did nothing wrong. But the words got stuck somewhere in my throat. Because deep down, something was telling me this wasn't an accident. And if it wasn't an accident, then someone had made a decision. Later that afternoon, Lily was sitting at the small desk in the guest room we shared. She liked to draw after school. Usually animals. Foxes. Owls. Sometimes entire imaginary forests. I walked past the doorway and noticed she was unusually quiet. No humming. No talking to herself. Just the scratch of a crayon against paper. So I stepped inside. "Hey, Bug," I said gently. "What are you drawing?" She turned the paper toward me. It was a picture of our family. My parents. My sister. Ryan. Ava. Me. Everyone standing together. But something was missing. I looked closer. "Where are you?" I asked softly. She shrugged. I didn't think I was supposed to be in it. That sentence hit harder than any argument ever could. 6 years old. And already learning what it feels like to be excluded. I sat beside her and hugged her tight. But inside my head, something was building. Questions. Doubts. Memories. Because when I replayed the photo shoot in my mind, small details started resurfacing. Little moments I had ignored. My mother adjusting Ava's hair 3 times. Emily whispering something in her ear. The way they barely spoke to Lily that day. And suddenly I had a thought that made my stomach sink. What if the photographer didn't make a mistake? What if he was asked to do it? That night after dinner, I took the framed portrait off the wall and set it on the kitchen table. Then I leaned closer. Really close. Looking for anything that might prove my suspicion. And that's when I noticed something strange. Near the edge of the bench. A tiny blur of yellow. Barely visible. Like the edge of fabric that had been poorly erased. My heart started pounding. Because Lily had been wearing a yellow dress. Which meant one thing. She hadn't just disappeared. She had been edited out. Deliberately. I walked into the living room where my mother was watching television. "Did you ask the photographer to edit the picture?" I asked. She didn't even look at me at first. "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. That single word felt rehearsed. Like she had already prepared it. I stood there for a moment. Waiting for her to add something. An explanation. But she didn't. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I walked down the hallway to grab a glass of water. And that's when I heard voices coming from the kitchen. My mother. And Emily. They were whispering. I couldn't hear everything. Just fragments. Low murmurs. Then Emily said something that made me stop breathing. Maybe it was better this way. Better. Better for who? Better for what? I stood there in the dark hallway realizing something I hadn't wanted to believe. Someone in my family had decided my daughter didn't belong in that photo. And the only person who could confirm it was the man who took it. So I picked up my phone, found the photographer's number on his website, and called him. The line rang twice. 3 times. Then he answered. And, before I could even introduce myself, Mark Jensen said something that made my blood run cold. "I was wondering when you'd call. Why would a photographer expect a call from a mother whose child had just disappeared from a picture?" That question echoed in my head the moment Mark Jensen said those words. I was wondering when you'd call. Not hello. Not who is this. He already knew exactly why I was calling. And suddenly my hands felt colder holding the phone. I stepped outside onto the back porch so no one in the house could hear me. The night air was cool. Quiet. The kind of silence that makes every word feel heavier. "Hi, this is Sarah Mitchell," I said. A pause. Then Mark exhaled slowly on the other end. "Yeah," he said. I figured. Something in his tone sounded uneasy. Not defensive. Not annoyed. Uneasy. And that made my stomach twist even tighter. "I have a question about the portrait," I said carefully. Another pause. Longer this time. Then he said something that immediately confirmed my worst suspicion. "Before you ask," he said, "I just want you to know. I didn't feel good about doing it. My grip tightened around the phone. Doing what? You didn't feel good about doing what? I asked. Mark hesitated again. You didn't know, he asked quietly. And, just like that, the air left my lungs. No, I said. I didn't. There was a faint rustling sound on his end of the line, like he was shifting in his chair. I normally don't talk about client requests, he said. It's kind of an unspoken rule in photography. But this situation felt different. Different. That word hung in the air between us. What situation? I asked. Then he finally said it. 2 days after the photo shoot, Mark explained, I got an email asking for an edit. My heart was already racing. An edit? I repeated. Yes. He paused again. And I could almost hear him debating how much he should say. The email came from Linda Mitchell, my mother. The words felt like a punch to the chest. What kind of edit? I asked. But deep down, I already knew. Mark cleared his throat. She asked me to remove one of the children from the image. My legs felt weak. I slowly sat down on the porch step. Which child? I asked. Silence filled the line. Then he said it. The younger girl in the yellow dress. Lily. There it was. Not a mistake. Not a technical error. A request. A deliberate one. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to process what I was hearing. My mom asked you to erase my daughter? I said quietly. Yes. His voice sounded uncomfortable now. She offered to pay an additional $300 for the edit. $300. That's what my daughter's place in the family photo had been worth. $300. At first, I told her no, Mark continued. I said removing someone from a family portrait changes the entire composition. He explained that professional photographers usually adjust lighting, colors, maybe remove a small distraction in the background. But removing a person? That's different. Especially a child sitting front and center. So what changed? I asked. Another uncomfortable pause. She insisted, he said. Your mother said the girl wasn't really part of the family. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not really part of the family. 6 years old. And already written out. I thought maybe it was some kind of custody situation, Mark continued. Sometimes families ask for weird edits after divorces. But something about the request had bothered him. She was very specific, he said. Specific how? I asked. She didn't just want the child removed. He sighed. She also asked me to move the other girl toward the center of the photo. Ava. My niece. Why? I asked. So the image would still look balanced, he said. Balanced. Like Lily had never been there in the first place. The level of planning behind that request made my stomach turn. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Someone had thought about this. Carefully. I kept the original file, Mark added. I always keep originals. That sentence caught my attention immediately. You still have it? I asked. Yes. The real photo. The one where Lily was still there. The one that showed the truth. But before I could ask anything else, something else happened. Behind me, the porch door creaked open. I turned. And there stood Lily. Barefoot. Holding her stuffed fox. Her eyes looked sleepy at first. But then I realized something. She had heard part of the conversation. How much did they pay? Mark was saying through the phone speaker. They paid me to erase her. The moment those words left his mouth, Lily's expression changed. Not confusion. Not curiosity. Hurt. Quiet, heavy hurt. She didn't say anything. She just stood there for a second. Then slowly turned around and walked back inside the house. My heart dropped. Mark, I have to call you back, I said quickly. I hung up the phone and rushed inside. The hallway was dim. The house silent. Except for a soft sound coming from the living room. Crying. I stepped inside. And there she was. Lily sitting on the floor. The framed portrait leaning against the couch beside her. Her small hands gripping the edge of the frame. Tears sliding quietly down her cheeks. She wasn't sobbing loudly. That would have been easier somehow. Instead, she just looked at the picture. Like she was trying to understand it. Like she was trying to figure out where she had gone. Mom, she whispered. And when she looked up at me, She asked a question no child should ever have to ask. If they didn't want me in the picture, do they still want me in the family? Why would a grandmother erase her own granddaughter from a family portrait? That was the question burning in my mind as I sat there on the living room floor with Lily crying beside me. And the truth is, part of me already knew the answer. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. Because sometimes the signs are there for years. Small things. Quiet things. Moments that feel uncomfortable but easy to brush off. Until one day, they stop being small. And they become something you can't ignore anymore. I gently pulled Lily into my arms. Her small body was tense, like she was trying not to cry too loudly. Kids do that sometimes when they're afraid they're causing trouble just by being upset. "I'm sorry," she whispered into my shoulder. That word hit me like a slap. Sorry. She thought this was her fault. "No," I said softly, pulling back so she could see my face. "You didn't do anything wrong." But even as I said it, I realized something. If Lily hadn't done anything wrong, then someone else had. And that someone was sitting in the next room pretending everything was normal. After Lily finally fell asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet. The framed portrait sat on the table in front of me. I kept staring at that empty space on the bench. And memories started resurfacing. Moments from the past 6 years that suddenly felt different now. Because Lily's father, Jason Miller, had never been popular with my family. Not even from the beginning. Jason and I met in college. He was funny, confident, a little stubborn. My family thought he was reckless. They said he wasn't stable enough, that he didn't fit in with us. But I married him anyway. And for a while, we were happy. Until things fell apart. The divorce 3 years ago had been messy. Arguments about money. Arguments about responsibility. Arguments about who had changed and who hadn't. But through all of that chaos, Lily had remained the one thing that mattered most to me. To my family, though, the divorce had become something else. A story. A narrative they repeated whenever my name came up. Sarah ruined her life, marrying him. I'd heard my mother say it more than once. Sometimes quietly. Sometimes when she thought I wasn't listening. In her mind, Jason wasn't just my ex-husband. He was the biggest mistake I had ever made. And Lily. Well, Lily looked exactly like him. Same dark hair. Same brown eyes. Same crooked little smile. Every time my mother looked at Lily, she saw Jason. A reminder of the man she blamed for everything that went wrong in my life. At least, that's what I started realizing as the night went on. But there was another piece to the puzzle. My sister, Emily. Growing up, Emily had always been the one my parents bragged about. Straight-A student. Scholarships. Corporate job by 25. House by 30. Everything in neat, perfect order. And when Emily had her daughter Ava, my parents treated that little girl like royalty. Birthday parties with huge decorations. Extravagant Christmas gifts. Endless photo albums. Ava was the golden grandchild. Meanwhile, Lily got polite smiles. Occasional hugs. But never the same excitement. At first, I convinced myself I was imagining it. But now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I decided to stop guessing. I found Emily in the kitchen making coffee. She looked up when I walked in. "You look tired," she said casually. "I didn't sleep much," I replied. I didn't bother with small talk. I walked straight to the point. "Why did Mom ask the photographer to erase Lily?" Emily froze. Not dramatically. Just a brief pause. But it was enough. "What are you talking about?" she said. Her voice sounded calm. Too calm. "I talked to Mark Jensen last night," I said. "The photographer." That's when her expression shifted. Only slightly. But I saw it. That tiny crack in the mask. "You shouldn't be calling people like that," she said. That was her response. Not denial. Not confusion. Just criticism. "Emily," I said quietly, "why did Mom do it?" For a moment, she didn't answer. She poured her coffee. Added cream. Stirred it slowly. Then finally she sighed. And the words that came out of her mouth were colder than I expected. "Mom just wanted one photo where it actually looked like our family." I stared at her, trying to understand what she meant. "What does that even mean?" I asked. Emily looked at me like the answer should have been obvious. You know what it means, she said. No, I said firmly. Explain it. She took a sip of coffee, then shrugged. Mom thought it would be easier if the picture focused on the people who are actually connected to us. Actually connected. My hands curled into fists. Lily is your niece, I said. Emily didn't respond. Instead, she said something even worse. You're the one who chose Jason, she said. And now every time Mom sees that kid, she sees him. That kid. Not Lily. Not her niece. Just a reminder. And Ava? I asked. Emily glanced toward the living room where her daughter was playing. Ava is Mom's real granddaughter. The sentence hung in the air like poison. 6 years. 6 years of subtle differences. Smaller birthday gifts. Less attention. Less warmth. And now the truth was finally out in the open. They hadn't just been treating Lily differently. They had been quietly deciding she didn't belong at all. The portrait was just the final step. The proof. But here's the part my sister didn't know. The part none of them knew yet. Last night, after Lily heard that phone call, I didn't just hang up with Mark Jensen. I called him again. And this time, I asked him for something specific. I want the original photo, I told him. The real one. The one they tried to erase. And I had a plan for what to do with it. Because the next morning, everyone in that house was going to see the truth. What happens when the truth walks into a room no one expected it to enter? That's the question I kept asking myself the next morning as I sat at the small desk in the guest room, staring at a large envelope resting beside my coffee. Inside that envelope was a photograph. The real photograph. The one my mother had paid $300 to hide. I had picked it up from Mark Jensen's studio early that morning before anyone else in the house woke up. He had printed it overnight after our second call. When he handed it to me, he looked uncomfortable. Not guilty. Just uneasy. Like he knew he had been caught in the middle of something ugly. I'm sorry, he said quietly as he passed me the envelope. I simply nodded. Because the truth was, he wasn't the person who needed to apologize. Now I sat there holding the envelope while the sounds of mourning drifted through the house. Cabinets opening. Coffee brewing. Emily's voice calling to Ava. My mother moving around the kitchen like she did every morning. Normal life. But today wasn't going to stay normal for very long. Lily sat on the bed behind me hugging her stuffed fox. She looked nervous. Not scared exactly. Just uncertain. Like she was waiting to see if she had somehow done something wrong again. I walked over and sat beside her. Hey, I said softly. She looked up at me. You remember the picture yesterday? She nodded slowly. Well, I continued, today we're going to show everyone the real one. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. The real one. The one where you're still in it. For the first time since last night. I saw a tiny spark of curiosity return to her face. Okay, she said. Simple. Trusting. That's the thing about kids. They believe the adults around them will fix things. Even when those adults are the ones who broke them. We walked into the kitchen together. Everyone was already there. My mother stood near the counter with her coffee. Emily sat at the table scrolling through her phone. Ryan leaned against the fridge. My father read the newspaper quietly like he always did. And hanging on the wall behind them was the edited portrait. The one where Lily had been erased. My mother noticed us first. Good morning, she said casually. Then she noticed the envelope in my hand. What's that? I walked to the table slowly. No reason, I said. I just thought we should look at the family portrait again. Emily rolled her eyes slightly. We already saw it yesterday. I know, I said. But this time, I brought another one. Now everyone looked up. I placed the envelope on the table, then carefully slid the photograph out and set it down, face up. The room went completely silent, because the picture they were looking at was the original. Golden trees, stone path, everyone smiling. And sitting right in the front row, in her bright yellow dress, was Lily, right where she had always been, right where she belonged. My mother's face changed instantly. The color drained from it. Her eyes flicked from the photo to me, then back to the photo again. For the first time since this whole thing started, she looked genuinely stunned. Emily leaned forward in her chair. "What is that?" she asked. "You know exactly what it is," I replied calmly. "The real photo." Ryan straightened up against the fridge. My father slowly lowered his newspaper. And my mother finally spoke. "Where did you get that?" she asked. "From the photographer," I said. "He keeps the original files." Another silence filled the room. Heavy. Uncomfortable. I pointed at the photo. "You paid him $300 to remove my daughter." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I just said the truth out loud. And somehow that made the words feel even louder. My mother's lips parted slightly, but nothing came out. Emily spoke instead. "You shouldn't be digging into things like that," she said. I looked at her. "No," I said quietly. "You shouldn't be erasing children from family photos." That shut her up. For a moment no one said anything. Then Lily stepped closer to the table. She looked down at both pictures. The real one in front of us, and the edited one hanging on the wall. She studied them carefully. Then she pointed at the real photo. "I like this one better," she said. Simple. Honest. A child's truth. I reached down and picked her up. She wrapped her arms around my neck. And that's when I turned toward the door. "We won't be in your next family photo either," I said. My mother finally found her voice. "Sarah." But I didn't stop. "Because we won't be there." I walked toward the front door with Lily in my arms. And for a second I wondered if anyone would try to stop us. But no one did. Except one person. Just as I reached the doorway, I heard movement behind me. I turned slightly. My father had stood up from the table. He walked slowly over to the wall where the edited portrait hung. No words. No speech. He simply lifted the frame off the hook, looked at it for a moment, then turned it face down on the counter. The room stayed silent. And that was the moment I realized something. The portrait on the wall had been missing someone important. But not Lily. Because months later, when Lily and I moved into our small apartment across town, I hung the real photo in our living room. Just the two of us. And every time I look at it now, something feels different. The picture isn't missing anyone. The people who erased Lily were never really family to begin with. So let me ask you something. If someone tried to erase your child from your family story, what would you do? Would you fight to stay in the picture? Or would you walk away and start a new one?